These days, and potentially always, there's been a lot of negativity towards escapism. There's this idea behind escapism that it is fleeing your responsibilities and doing the wrong thing and not being productive when you could be doing so many amazing things in the real world. Now, let's be honest. Life is cope at the end of the day. We do what we can to while away the time before our universal forthcoming annihilation, and the different forms of escapism on offer are a means to do that. Now, I do think that one of the reasons why people are discouraged from escapism oftentimes is because there might be things they haven't tried in real life that might bring them some benefits they otherwise have not experienced in life. But that's not always the case. Oftentimes, they just want people to, quote-unquote, do the right thing, which amounts to existing in a state of perpetual boredom, ennui, and general discontent. So yeah, escapism is a thing. And I actually think it's fairly important, all things considered, because let's be honest, in contrast to what Forrest Gump likes to claim, life is not always a box of chocolates. And historically, there have been many forms of escapism, obviously, but arguably these forms have increased a great deal in recent decades, with the onset of television, movies, and then video games, above all, video games. And escapism is basically a way to lose yourself in a different world, enjoying that world and forgetting the woes of the world you actually inhabit in the process. There are other aspects to it, for example, a sense of accomplishment in certain video games or appreciating a story, but the idea behind it ultimately is to get so engrossed in this activity that is not related to reality, such that you wish to partake of it more and more. But let's be perfectly honest, not all forms of escapism are equal. By that I don't mean the type of escapism in and of itself, for example, whether you enjoy reading books, watching films, playing video games, that each of these genres is somehow better or worse than the other. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that the quality of escapism is going down drastically and rapidly, despite the fact that simultaneously we have more forms of escapism than ever, more variety, more opportunities. If you just look at the gaming world, there's more than there ever has been. The same could be said for films, although films don't have nearly as much on offer as do video games. But despite increased quantity, we definitely have decreased quality. That is, for the most part, almost a universal consensus. But what specifically is going on with this? By this I mean, quite simply, that yes, there are many opportunities to engage in escapism. For example, there are tons of games you could play. But how much you're drawn into that game, some would argue addicted to the game, although I wouldn't necessarily use that word, is quite variable and depends. I find increasingly the types of games on offer, to speak nothing of films, because films also fall into this bucket list, as it were, that the quality is simply diminished. So sure, you can boot up your PC, or if you're a console peasant, boot up your console and play any number of games, and you might get some level of entertainment out of them, but the question is, for how long? Because here we enter this principle of the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is a universal. And I think one of the reasons for this is because of the formulaic nature of most of the games that come out these days. The reality is if you have 7 different games, but they're all basically doing the same thing, you're probably not going to get a maximized dopamine response. You can play one game for a while, maybe the second one, but it's not giving you that oomph. And proper escapism, which I think is actually important given how miserable life is at times, requires that you completely lose yourself in the task. And that is increasingly difficult. Yes, some games do that, but after a while, that effect tends to wear off. And it's especially true if you're young. So yes, you'll notice that younger people are more inclined to play certain types of games, and they bear the brunt of the criticism when it comes to quote-unquote gaming addiction. But it all seems fairly mindless. And when you reach a certain point, either through dint of experience or age or all of the above, you kind of get burnt out on it. And a big part of this is simply because games are not as entertaining as they used to be. Neither are films usually. Very little out there that really grabs your attention. And there are different ways to grab your attention. You could have a complex leveling system, amazing combat, something that really draws you in, and as a consequence you feel engrossed in the activity that you're engaging in. And those types of games are probably more common and they can still produce them. But in terms of story and feeling a sense of connection to the characters and the plot of the story, that's comparatively rare these days. Very rare, I'd argue. I mean, think about this. When's the last time you played a game, or watched a film for that matter, that blew your socks off because it was so compelling, Maybe it brought you to tears and you were taken so far aback that you couldn't think straight. It almost never happens. I'm not saying it was a common occurrence in the past, but things have become way too formulaic. And part of that is just down to the problem of iteration. You can only iterate so much upon something until it becomes the same thing over and over and over, which is to say that creativity is difficult and you can't always expect people to be producing new things constantly. This is not unique to the gaming world or the world of films and cinema. If you think about it, in the 20th century, many artists felt that they had run out of ideas, hence modern art, and they tried different things, but it didn't work out too well. So there's that. But there's also an unwillingness to try new things, in part because people are afraid to take risks because it involves potential financial loss. And recently I saw a video that showed the plans of a major developer / publisher for the late 2020s, early 30s in terms of the games they want to roll out. And it was this laundry list of everything you've seen under the sun already. Grinding, certain leveling systems, the tried and true, right? Pay to win. Now, clearly these systems are in place because people buy into them and for some reason continue to pursue them. But when I'm talking about the end of escapism, I'm not talking about just mindlessly like a drone playing something, but really appreciating its content. And I don't think that's very common anymore. As I said, when's the last time you had a character ensemble that you really cared about and thought was important, that might have touched you in some way? It hardly exists anymore. And I think we are very much, at best, in a silver age of gaming. You see, back in the day when people talked about Roman literature, they would talk about the golden age of Roman literature, followed by the silver age, followed by, you get it. And I do think we're in a silver age or post-silver age of gaming. Many games are quite okay, but very little exceeds the okay mark. And that leads, in my case and other people's cases that I know, to a diminished return on enjoyment in these games and the inability to experience that feeling of escapism. On top of this, we have wokeism and politics from the real world that is injected into games and entertainment, films as well, that should not be a part of the storytelling, in my humble opinion, because almost universally it makes it worse. It ruins these products. It makes it difficult, even more difficult, to escape from reality when you want to enjoy these things. And that doesn't seem to be ceasing anytime soon either. So we're really stuck between a rock and a hard place. As I've said, you have the formulaic, repetitive nature of games and films these days, on top of the political BS that makes it even worse, because the politics of the day get injected into the games again and again, thus adding to the already pernicious repetition. What can be done? Probably not all too much, but one thing that I think is key is the unwillingness or inability to take risks anymore because of the financial incentives. If you take a risk and something's a flop, people have lost potentially tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in the process if we're talking about a AAA title. And although it didn't seem to actually have an effect on sales or the people playing it, I'm sure you heard about this nonsense that affected the Harry Potter game that recently came out. Real-world politics, again, if not directly in the game, clashing with the game because the author of Harry Potter has certain opinions about certain things. Whatever. So basically, we need a filmmaker or developer who is incredibly wealthy, that has FU money, that can do whatever they want, and that is willing to pursue something that is truly good, truly in-depth, that can knock our proverbial socks off. That is theoretically possible, but it's almost certainly not going to happen. And I don't know about you, but a world in which escapism, proper escapism, where you really, really enjoy things on a level where you forget about reality, when that becomes ever more difficult, I find that very worrisome. Yes, people talk about VR and similar such things, but proper VR that whisks you away to some other dimension is so far away you might as well not even consider it. So what happens? You end up playing old games. You end up returning to the past, but even that's not very effective anymore because you've done it so many times. Not many options left, gentlemen. There are all these real-life problems, real-life obstacles, and then the cherry on top is that these fantastical worlds that people create are little better than the reality that we inhabit these days, which is, I think, quite disappointing. And on that depressing note, as always, thank you for tuning in. Special thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing. You support the channel. Keep it going. And if you can engage in the usual YouTube jazz of liking the video, sharing the video, leaving comments, subscribing, if you're not yet a subscriber, would be much appreciated. And I will see you next time if I'm still alive. Until then, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content,
please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.